What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the third album by rap group Lil Jon and the East Side Boyz. Basically, this product is called Put Your Hood Up, and it came out in the spring of 2001. So it's just kind of a strange time in rap music as far as those pitches kind of happened, just because the amalgamating sounds that kind of were dominant in like the 2000s was starting to happen here between folks like Ludacris, Mystical, Outkast, and like Nelly, some of those type of folks that were kind of going around in Southern hip hop, some of those type pitches. There were a lot of train track lane just within the pitch behind it, and this is definitely one of those albums that particularly did that. This is around back when times when Aaliyah was still alive, some of those type pitches, just different type bears, different sounds that were kind of going on here just within the pitch. This is kind of within the pitch as to like the initial kind of moments of like crunk music, what it was starting to be. Now Lil Jon had been around since the 90s. He did have an album in the year 2000 and 1997 or 98, one of those type times, just within the pitch, but this was kind of the album he got like a particularly pretty grand single with Bia Bia, which is a pretty excellent type pitch to have gotten. But yeah, obviously Lil Jon got a lot larger in 2002, 2003, 2004. When I reviewed Kings of Crunk back in October, I gave that like a classic score, and it definitely was, because that was Lil Jon completely fleshed out in his sound, and just became like a predominant name as usual. But this is kind of like the album before the album, I'd have to say, pretty much like, now Crunk Juice was obviously another excellent type one, even though I reviewed that back in 2015. I still would have to say it's a virtual classic as well, but this is actually a pretty damn well near classic as well, I'd have to say. I do feel like Kings of Crunk and Crunk Juice are probably a hair better just because Lil Jon found his sound and got a lot more comfortable with it, but this is a skeletal. If you want to see like the OG type sound, it's the initial kind of formation. Now I'm not as full-blown sure. I want to say, just because Lil Jon often calls himself the king of crunk as far as those pitches can happen, I would probably say that the crunk sound was at least trying to be made as far back as 1997 and 2000, some of those type pitches. Just wondering if those early albums with the East Side Boyz had that same sort of flair as this particular product, but it mostly kind of nails it here. And I just would have to say it's like a virtual classic, just within the sense behind it. This is definitely pretty feral for 2001. I definitely think you would not terribly find many more vicious albums, and especially in terms of like club hitters and things like that back in like the spring and winter of 2001, as far as those pitches kind of happen with it. I just have to say, definitely ahead of the times for what it did, but it's just kind of quieter. I just look after it in terms of promotion. Lil Jon just really only had the single Bia Bia, and then kind of vanished for like a good while. He did not come back until like the summer or late summer or fall of 2002 with some of those type hits, and obviously some of those like Salt Shaker and I Don't Give a Fuck and some of those type pitches as far as that particular kind of happens. Maybe Salt Shaker was Lil Jon's. I think it was Get Low and I Don't Give a Fuck, some of those type pitches. But Lil Jon was definitely more a product of like late 2002, 2003. But this was a good look around the time. Definitely had some good fares. Just initially kind of kicked things off and just did a lot of damage. Very impactful. Just very much like Eminem's Slim Shady LP, where probably his later albums like the Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem Show, Encore kind of are seen as more of classics. But Slim Shady LP was definitely good just because he managed to find a sound. This is one of those type ones that has that same type flair. I feel like for the most part, this is pretty much like damn near like the commercial debut of Lil Jon, just because his earlier two albums just didn't really have any commercial bops on there or casual bops. It was really Bia Bia that was one of the ones that initially kind of got Lil Jon in the spotlight as far as those fairs could happen. Definitely a good look. Had Ludacris, Too Short, and cat named Big Cap and China White, and a cat named Nathan Smith on there. I'm not sure where the Nathan Smith came from, but just within the pitch as far as saying, just definitely a pretty nice song. I kind of question why Lil Jon did not try to follow up this particular album with like a second single, something to further out the buzz as far as those pitches can happen. Definitely would have been a pretty vicious type thing. I think there would have been some easy kind of highlights that probably could have happened. I would have said Put Your Hood Up, and possibly Nothing's Free, or like Where Them Girls At would have been a nice one, and probably like even, well yeah, I would say at least those songs would pretty much have that particular fare as far as those pitches kind of happen. It's just a good type pitch as far as getting that, so it's a good look here, just being able to say. So I look after the tone. So yeah, like I said, there's only one single off this project. Just the concept behind it was just within that pitch behind it. So the lead single and only single is Bia Bia, and this once again has Ludacris, Too Short, and folks like that on here. Definitely a good look to kind of have this around the time. But once again, this is, even though it seems like this may be one of Lil Jon's debut singles in the East Side Boyz, I had to say he really was around in the 90s, far back to the 90s, as far as those pitches can happen. But this is definitely very revolutionary for 2001. It's like a classic kind of early 2000s crunk trailblazer to kind of get here. Just a great party starter for the time. I would definitely feel like just a rough draft Lil Jon smash it to kind of get within that context. So just kind of kind of has that aspect of just being able to nail it. Do like the appreciation. Just Crunk in like the early 2000s, especially before 2002, was an interesting type pitch because I just don't think it hit folks heavily enough as far as that particular kind of went. You know, judging, I mean, pretty much the only real Southern cat that was really popping as big as Lil Jon around this particular time might have been Mystical, who really was only getting like 1 or 2 singles, and then Ludacris was starting to pop off a bit, and then you had Outkast, who would have the who was just starting to get fleshed out a lot more. It's just within the pitch. So really, Lil Jon had a pretty good niche to get to, and it was a good type fair. I can see that as that initially kind of happened there. But I do feel like, I mean, this album at least went gold. It said that in 2002, which was about a year after it came out, that this album went gold, which means it sold 500,000 copies. Obviously, Kings of Crunk and Crunk just sold a lot more, got to multi-platinum, but just kind of the pitch, I feel like the reason why this only went gold is just because there was only one single. I definitely think, I mean, it's kind of here and there as to whether or not it would have connected. I question if Lil Jon would have dropped a single off this project and it wouldn't have connected as well as Bia Bia, whether or not they would have promoted it as well, or they would have slashed him and said, well, you're going to have to get back to work. So it's just kind of the concept. He just kind of played his hand. It was just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to settle with one and be satisfied with that. And so he didn't really have any strikes against him because he didn't attempt to kind of say whether or not that there was like something more that could have probably pushed this product. So it's just kind of, I mean, in retrospect, yeah, a second single would have been really excellent off this album. Really would have been a good look. But if it would have delayed his album coming out, it would have been the same type fair. So I'm not really sure as far as that pitch happens, but there are some ones I do, like I said, I noticed some of the ones I felt like probably could have been a single. There are some relative good songs, and this is a virtual classic album here. But so there's 15 songs on this album. There's actually 21 songs on here, but minus like the 5 skits and interludes, that narrows it down to 16. Or that narrows minus like the 6 intros and outros and interludes, that narrows it down to 15 songs. But I'm at least going to count the intro because that's a pretty good gem to kind of get there. I do like the kind of glaze type tone of that one. So I'm going to count this album in terms of the scores. I'm going to rank out of 16 songs. So basically, out of 16 songs, I wound up recommending 13 out of 16. So that's the pitch. But basically, the 3 songs I don't recommend on here. The 3 songs I don't recommend on here would just be Bia Bia 2, Go Shawty Go, and I Like Them Girls, which basically the concept, the thing about I Like Them Girls and Go Shawty Go is these are both kind of more like just not quite as quality dance club type songs. They just have like a more kind of early 90s, like I feel like the vibe, trying to pull out the vibe of like Salt and Pepper, some of those type pitches, they just feel like more East Coast type gems that just don't nail the appeal behind it. But I think Lil Jon was collaborating with folks that were just not from like any particular coast as far as those pitches can happen. But I just feel like the concept is within the pitch of getting some of these type ones, the more frenetic kind of vibes of like trying to nail those Salt and Pepper and Jam Master Jay and like Sir Mix-a-Lot type vibes just didn't really pull off as well in this particular product, minus like one song which I think was Nasty Girls for us was pitched. But those 2 songs, Like Them Girls, which really I think Like Them Girls is also kind of a bass heavy type one. I mean, it was more Go Shawty Go that kind of flopped on that particular thing that I was describing, but I Like Them Girls just didn't have as much appeal towards it. Really, the hook was not that good on there, just within the pitch. It was this kind of messy type song that didn't have much kind of conjunction about it. And then Bia Bia 2 was just, I mean, I would have liked this song within the pitch, but it really didn't do much to enhance it. I mean, basically it had Too Short and China White on there, which were already on the original song. So I didn't really see the aspect of why there was a second one on here when it didn't really have too much variations. I mean, it might have mildly enhanced the production on there, but it didn't really do much. I don't say, it just kind of felt like extraneous. It kind of felt extraneous almost just within the pitch behind it. I mean, if it had had like an enhanced production or something that would have, if it would have had like an enhanced production or something like that, or some new folks on there that could have torn it up all over again, but it just didn't seem to really be. I feel like the original was pretty satisfactory within the pitch. Real excellent type song, one of the best on the album, the original, but this one didn't really live up to the original. So yeah, I give this album like a 9.75 out of 10. I just would have to say, I mean, basically 13 out of 16 if it would have been all 13 songs, because one of the 13 songs is an intro. Although I do thoroughly like the intro, I kind of feel like within the pitch it would actually be more of like 12 out of 16, not counting the intro. So as far as that pitch kind of has, I mean, it's right on the cuff of getting like a 10 out of 10 score. I just feel like within the aspect, I probably think another complaint about it was just the fact that it needed more promotion, needed another single. It's not necessarily light on like quality songs on here, but it's just light on like casual fare a little bit. I mean, it definitely has the gems, but in terms of folks that are more just casual bound only and are just looking for like the radio hits, it just doesn't have a further hit to say, oh, that's another one. It's just not like Ludacris's Word of Mouth or like Eminem's Eminem Show or one of those type ones. Even Lil Jon's Kings of Crunk as far as those pitches. Just a nice bubbler to kind of get things. Sounds just like got a nice bubbler single and Bia to kind of get things bubbling as far as those pitches can happen. Just a nice turn up type one, but in terms of the other casual hits, it's kind of here and there. In terms of other casual hits, it's not quite as loud, I'd have to say, but just with an aspect is. This is a virtual classic album, so we'll just go ahead and get to some of these. Probably one of the most immediate songs to go for in terms of like what to look for after casual wise, the big hit smash Bia I'd say is Put Your Hood Up. It's like a good buzz single and follow up hit to Bia, like I was saying, relative noisemaker to kind of get here in a Crunk razor just to be able to get within that pitch. So this one just has a real rowdy type one. Another initial kind of format of what Crunk was kind of up to, just the fleshing out of it, just within the pitch behind it. Real nice one. Obviously, Kings of Crunk's a little bit more gnarled and crazy if you're looking for like the most ferocious Lil Jon in terms of like his classic type fare. I do feel like Crunk Juice is a little bit more melded. It did have some crazy type ones on there, obviously, but probably the crazy and say Kings of Crunk and Crunk Juice are obviously crazier just in the pitch. Both those are classic Crunk, but this one is just kind of more than the pitch. Just some buzz type ones and just overall initial type gems kind of get that, but it's definitely one of the crazier ones on here. This is pretty widespread album for what it was doing in 2001. Just have to keep saying that for 2001 this is excellent. So this is some good stuff. Let My Nuts Go is a nice song as well. This is like a sleek kind of pimp type Let My Nuts Go is like a sleek kind of pimp type nightclub gliss to kind of get here just after hours vibing. I would definitely feel like in some strip club gloss definitely get within that tone. Just real nice after hours type pitch, just ahead of like the early 2000s. I would definitely say within that fare. Barely feels ripped out of 2001 as far as those pitches can happen. Just some excellent type fare. I would say that Y'all Ain't Ready. Let's say the intro song Y'all Ain't Ready is a nice one as well. It's like a glaring kind of evening malaise to kind of get here. Just a great vibe after a long day's work. I'd say the song is just a great vibe after a long day's work. I'd have to say to sip a cold drink, get hype real quick as far as those pitch can happen. Is that relative slag, just kind of red skies, just type pitch, whether it's summer, autumn, some of those type fares. Just a good concept of just getting ready to get turned up. Do you like the initial typeness? I don't know if Kings of Crunk had an intro like this or Crunk Juice, some of those type ones. So this is some good type fare. I do like it when albums nail the intros, especially bopping, just because it's not super common that I realize that intros are not always that popular within the album type fare if they don't nail it, and sometimes they just don't have them at all. But this is a good example of an intro, and this is a good example of an intro that did nail that vibe. So it's just very glazed type one, just some malaise that works and pulls off the energy. Heads Off My Niggas is a nice one here. It's like a lively, more typical and factory Lil Jon stand. It's like a lively and more typical kind of factory Lil Jon to kind of get within that tone. This like stand on couches, time to go ham and loony as far as those pitches gonna happen. It's like reminiscent of Kings of Crunk. I'd say this is one of the more gnarled type ones. I feel like there's a lot more bass and just skeletal type vibes on this particular product. Just the initial concept of like the melding of it. Probably more songs apart from Put Your Hood Up and maybe Heads Off My Niggas, some of those type ones. But in terms of like the most ferocious, when you think of like a song like I Don't Give a Fuck or some of those type ones knocking heads off from like Kings of Crunk, I'd have to say doesn't quite get as feral. I'd probably say Bia, Put Your Hood Up or some of the craziest type ones, but there are some ones on here that do have like that relative sound. So Lil Jon was a pretty good powder cake just within the sense behind it. A nice radio relative appeal would be Where Them Girls At. I'd have to say it's like an initial kind of dance club gem to kind of get here, just an early bird kind of salt shaker vibes and Get Low. I would have to say within that pitch, this could have been like a buzz single, would have been a pretty good pitch behind it. Just a good concept, kind of have some of this here, make some good noise just within the fare behind it. Just the aspect of having some of those type ones. I mean, Lil Jon was not bad at songwriting within these pitches, so it definitely has the aspect of just getting these crowd pleasers as far as those pitches can happen. I really do feel like it probably could have had maybe 2 or 3 cuts on here that probably could have gotten some relative radio airplay just in the pitch behind it. It's not like this album is not social, it's just kind of the pitch that in terms of something you're going to recognize, like you've heard daily on like the radio on like a Thursday or Friday, some of those type pitches, it just doesn't have those ones. That's just kind of fair, but it is some good stuff. You're like Where Them Girls, that's a good buzz single. Now there is one on here, it's like some good UGK type vibes. Now we Can't Stop Pimpin'. It's like some midday dredge kind of getting like a lady sense, I would feel like here. So it's just kind of a makeshift song just with more ladies in mind. Lil Jon's normal kind of bae for that sort of conduct. Ubi is on here. It's good concept to get her on this particular project. This is like, it's like some usual outs, I'd have to say. It just reminds of UGK type comics, some of those type fares that Pimp C and Bun B would kind of do around those times, I'd say. And it's like a smoke type song and a simp type song kind of get within that fare. Just typical type one. T.I. is pretty good at these songs too. Paul Wall, some of those type folks, Slim Thug, some of those type cats definitely within the particular. Definitely gives some Texas type vibes. It's dope that 8Ball and MJG are on here as well. Just some good pitches like that, and a few other chicas, Mimi and Sincerely, some pitches like that. Not really sure, don't know as much about them, but just had to say, some good type fare. A good fusion of songs would be Move Bitch. It's like a bass heavy, kind of gnarled Crunk jump off to kind of get here. It just goes great with Bia. I would definitely feel like it's like a good Crunk fusion with like the 3-6 Mafia type Crunk that they particularly had around the early 2000s. the early 2000s, this is a real hot song to kind of get within that fare. So it's just a nice one. This is pretty good. Just overall, yeah. So Move Bitch just reminds of like 36 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears, some of those type pitches, like a song like Who Run It, some of that type fare that they were doing with the Unbreakables, and When the Smoke Clears, some of that type fare. But Lil Jon's craziness combined with 36 Mafia's craziness, definitely a good thumbs up to kind of get that. So in that fare. And then Bounce, that's a real nice one though. This is more vintage Lil Jon. This reminds me of later Lil Jon. This is probably one of the more polished ones in terms of the pitch. I like something a little bit more crazy. Bounce, that's like a quick pace, kind of get tore up club hitter, kind of get definitely pound some shots. I'd have to say dance club and torque smash kind of get here definitely is just some nice heat to kind of have. Definitely one of the more vicious type ones. This is another good melded type one. Great look for the early 2000s, especially 2001 as far as those fares kind of having just some real nice tones. It really nails that particular vibe. In terms of like full-blown songs towards getting towards up, in terms of full-blown songs towards getting tore up, I would definitely say probably some of the craziest on here would be Heads Off, My Niggas, Bounce That, Bia Bia, Put Your Hood Up, some of those type ones. I mean, this is an album and a pitch of a product here to get tore up, get some shots in your system, but not quite as full-blown. It feels more of like this getting crunk, feels more of like getting crunk, going crazy, like a dance club, some pitches like that, getting some women dancing real hard and heavy as far as those pitches kind of happen, possibly popping bottles, but it's just not as full blown towards designated towards it. It's not to say like this album is not a great album to get tore up to, but it's just kind of within the pitch. This is more just dance club type energy within the pitch, of just, you know, socializing just the pitch behind it. But it, you know, there are songs for that on here. I'd say it's also halfway that I just didn't designate as much, but there are some ones definitely like Bounce. That's one of those. So that's to say. I'm trying to think of some other songs I haven't talked about on here. That might actually be all of them. Oh yeah, I haven't talked about Nasty Girl. Nasty Girl's like a throwback to early 90s kind of Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer days, I'd have to say here. Just some Fly Girl type music, definitely a retro dance pounder kind of getting us this overall quick song. Now this is an example of a song that nailed those particular vibes of some of those songs that I didn't recommend didn't do as well. This is a good type pitch, kind of get within that fare of like a vintage kind of 2 Live Crew, Vanilla Ice, MC Hammer type pitches, some of those type fares that just feels ripped out of 91. It's real nice frenetic type pitch to kind of get within that. If you do have some retro type chicas that remember those particular vibes from back in like just, you know, folks that are gonna, you know, enjoy Salt and Pepper type days and the Shoop Wadoop type days, some of that type fare, just good type pitch, can have some of that type fare for some of that. It's real excellence. And then Uh-Oh is a nice one as well. It's like a thumping kind of sketchier early days of Uh-Oh is like a thumping kind of sketchier early days of Crunk Rumble to kind of get within that tone. Just a very refreshing original type fare for 2001. I would definitely feel like this slaps pretty well. This is just a good song to be stuck and kind of zoned to as far as those pitch kind of have with it. Just a great type fare kind of get within that pitch behind it. So yeah, just, oh yeah, I don't think I talked about Who You With either. It's another nice one within the pitch. Another bass type one, just like Move Bitch, Bia Bia, some of those type pitches. Really has good flair about it. Who You Wit's like a knocking, kind of usual fare, night venue crunk to kind of get here within the pitch. Kind of skeletal, but OG stuff here. The song is skeletal, but it's OG stuff for like the crunk subgenre as far as those pitches kind of happen. This song is just super nice, kind of gets. So it's just some good type tones. Just the aspect behind it. I realize that this album is relatively ancient. I feel like the more melded type sound, a definite better starting point would probably be Kings of Crunk, and definitely Crunk Juice as far as those fares can happen for younger type folks that don't know as much full bound about Lil Jon, especially considering that he has not dropped an album since 2010. A lot of these albums might feel ancient nowadays just within the pitch. I mean, if you were raised on like his singles or something like that, these are definitely going to feel like ancient and dinosaur-like within the pitch behind it. But there's just some excellent type fare. Probably some of these type ones on here. This is the concept of this is like one of the first albums that kind of had Crunk in like a commercial spotlight, and that's just kind of the fare behind this. There weren't too many Crunk albums really before this, as far as those pitches can happen, at least where you're going to have them on the radio talking about fuck that shit, whoop that trick, smash that hoe, some of those type pitches just within the tone, at least the relative aspect. I mean, obviously that was kind of around, but in terms of like, you know, radio singles just in the pitch, I like the standard Lil Jon type flair. This is one of the initial type ones that kind of did. It's just in the pitch, but look after it. Yeah, this is a relatively revolutionary type album, just like the Slim Shady LP, just like 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, some of those type ones. This is one of those ones that was definite train track lane as far as those pitch can happen. Did some excellent type fare. But that's the concept about this album. So I give this album basically, once again, like a 9.75 out of 10. Just the pitch behind a lot of this here. Just real excellent type flair. Just missed it by like a mild hair. Just pretty much having to do just with the lack of promotion as far as those pitch can happen. I mean, these hits are on here. A little bit more skeletal, a little bit more melded, or a little bit less melded. Just a little bit more rough draft around the edges just within the pitch. They're not half baked, but it's just kind of the concept of this. It just has like a minor snag and like the sheer amount of casual feralness that just probably could have used one more anchored song. I think the attempt should have at least been made, but I'm not that mad about it. Not huffing and puffing about it as far as those pitches can happen. It's just a good pitch, so I just look after it. But the social score, as a result, I'd probably give the social score like a 9.75 also, because definitely this song is particularly crazy. If you are looking for early 2000s craziness, this one that kind of did it as far back as, for the most part, is things we kind of get within that relative tone before most of that type fare. This is definitely, like, for 2001, this was state of the art. Definitely some stuff that was definitely pretty vicious for the time. You know, definitely before, 3 6 Mafia was kind of doing this. That's another album when the smoke clears, and Choices the album, or some other ones that were kind of like that. But apart from them, there just wasn't a full blown ton of these. Just within the fare behind it. So 3 6 Mafia, Lil Jon were some of those type folks that kind of did it. These songs are pretty hitting just in the pitch. And the unfortunate thing is it only has one single, but it does have some great buzz songs. It's just kind of similar to Eminem when you think of songs like Drug Ballad and Kill You and Kim and some of those type of ones that are just popular songs. It's kind of the same thing with Lil Jon, just in the pitch behind it, but it is relatively crazy, so some good type fare. Lil Jon's definitely a character, has some affable personalities, great songs to get tore up to, great songs to dance to, great songs to get crunk and get women twerking as far as this pitch can happen, so great type fare. So in terms of the future, like, once again, the unfortunate thing is Lil Jon has not really dropped an album since 2010. I have always wanted that Party Animal album that was supposed to come out in 2011 in the early 2010s, but just never happened. But it'd be great to get at least like a Lil Jon mixtape. There's not terribly much more Lil Jon to really get to as far as those pitches can happen. There's obviously his 97 and 2000 albums, which are going to be even sketchier than this particular one. And there actually is like a 2004 Lil Jon album that's not Crunk Juice, that's kind of unofficial, but it kind of is, and has like maybe some extra stuff on there. There is like maybe a mixtape, and maybe not an official mixtape, but there might be some mixtapes that have like some Lil Jon extras or Lucy as far as those pitches can happen. I'll look around for some of that, but it's definitely some excellent type fare, virtual classic here, very sharp party type product that's just great overall for 2001.